Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a rather delayed Derek's Live web chat show with Graham Jones, who it's taken me 5 weeks to get onto the program. Delighted to welcome you, Graham. And I just want to say, guys, thanks for your support since Monday and your messages. That's been really terrific, and people have been sending me messages. And I did a little extra thing today, this afternoon. I sent out a reminder to people on my special list, and if you want to go on my special list, please send me an email. I'll put you on it, and that's a good way of doing it. We've got 16 people on today, and that's a record for a Thursday. And I know I'm competing with the Prime Minister in the UK, Boris Johnson. I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, and he's on TV now. So thanks for joining me. Tell you a little bit about Graham. I've got a big list about Graham. I'm going to embarrass him very quickly. He's a psychologist. He's written 28 books. He's a Hall of Fame speaker in the UK. His brand is the Internet Psychologist. He sends a newsletter out at 10 o'clock every Saturday morning if you're interested, about current affairs and psychology and business.
Thanks,
which is
Will.
fantastic. I get that. I copy. That's where I got the idea to send my newsletter. He's head of the business enterprise degree at the University of Buckingham, where he spends 3.5 days. He and I run something called the South Bank Think Tank, which is for lifelong learners who want to share their wisdom. And we run a top masterclass as well, where we have 17 sessions of 17 minutes. And following what people have told us, it might be 31 sessions of 8 minutes, because I understand everybody's attention span has dropped. His books, Clickology and Sales Genius, have been selling really well on Amazon. My brain's going after all that. And he advised me when I got an email from Pearson in 2014, which said, would you like to write a book for us? And I said, I don't really want to write another book, Graham. I hate writing books. He said, you're crazy. Just accept it and get on with it. And it was the best advice. And you get your best advice from your mates, even if you don't want to hear that. So Graham, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And my first question is, Graham, after that introduction, what happened at Polydor Records with a young man that had won a prize and the lead singer in the Who, Roger Daltrey?
Well, I used to work for Polydor Records a long time ago, and Polydor took upon itself to do the first ever reality TV show in the entertainment sector. And we worked with the BBC, and the BBC did this show, which was about a dancing competition. So it was a UK disco dance competition. And the idea was that we'd go around all the country, there'd be regional heats, somebody would win in each region, there'd be a big national final, and who would be the best disco dancer. And the prize, work this out, because I couldn't work it out and I worked for the company. The prize for the best dancer was a record contract. So the competition was to see if somebody could dance. We had no idea if the winner was able to sing, but they got a recording contract. And it was crazy. Yeah. And the winner became my property at Polydor to look after. And so this young lad had won this competition, and he turns up, and his dad was his manager, and he's sitting in my office, and he was snapping his fingers at me about all the publicity he wanted. And he said to me, this was like a Wednesday afternoon, and he said to me, I want my son on the front cover of the Sunday Times magazine on Sunday. And I said, well, you'll be lucky, because it was printed 6 weeks ago. So he said, well, tell him to scrap that one. He's much more important. And I, politely pointed out that, you could make all these demands, but it wasn't going to happen. Meanwhile, on the other side of the office was Roger Daltrey, who at the time, and still now, of course, was a big international global star. And Roger Daltrey never snapped his fingers at me. He sat in my office. He was reading some papers that he needed to read, made himself a cup of coffee, just said, hello, how are you? Did nothing. Yeah. So Roger Daltrey, of course, all these years later is still a star, still performing. And that young man has never been seen since. His record canned, and I don't know what's happened to him. So, somebody who was snapping their fingers and thought they were it got nowhere, and the person who treated people very nicely has succeeded very well.
It's a
There's a
fantastic
message there.
isn't there? Fantastic message, absolutely. And I have tickets for the Who at the O2 in August. What's the chances of talking about my generation and Happy Jack?
Yeah, quite. Yep.
Wilkins says it's zero. That's some more money I'm owed back, apart from a cruise, tickets for the cricket and everything else. Graham, let's turn to the university, Buckingham University, where you are now something really important, a professor or something, or whatever it is. What's going on in the university sector at the moment?
Well, it's suffering like a lot of other sectors. So here in the UK, the prediction is that we'll probably see several universities go bust in the next few months. We won't be one of them, but there will be several who will disappear. Student registrations for September are plummeting because students don't know what to do. Warwick University a couple of weeks ago said they would definitely be losing at least 30 million this year. And that's one of the biggest research universities in the UK. So, and they're going to be losing a lot of money. So we're going to see lots of universities in real trouble because of this. So we've got universities who've got the willingness to do what they need to do for whatever the new normal is going to be. So Buckingham's one of those. In fact, we're leading the way in many respects. You've got other universities who've got the willingness, like Durham, who after hundreds of years want to dramatically change what they're doing. But they're not being allowed to by their trade unions. And then you've got the people who've got the money to do it. So you've got Cambridge and Oxford and people like that who've got pots of money to do it, but not the willingness. And so we're going to see massive change in higher education.
Okay,
dramatic change.
You were telling me when we prepped this that you're putting all the courses online at the moment, but they're a maximum of 20 minutes, I think, and the student attention spans, they just run it through on YouTube on fast forward and then decide if they're going to watch it or something. Is that right?
Right. So typically a lecture at most universities is a 2-hour session, but you don't talk to them for 2 hours. Obviously, there's lots of toing and froing and interaction and so on. So it's not just somebody standing up front talking, but they would be with you for 2 hours. There'd be breaks. There'd be ways of doing it. So in order to recreate that, what we're doing is creating 15 to 20 minute little video segments that deliver some of the learning, giving them some things to go off and do, some activities to do, quizzes and all kinds of things, and then bringing them back to the next video and so on. So they're step by step. But what we're noticing is that even 20 minutes is probably pushing it. And I think that one of the things we learn as speakers, that the old kind of 45-minute keynote has died quite a lot over the years, and you find that people want you to speak for 15 to 20 minute sessions. So the whole TED Talk 17, 18-minute kind of format is doing really well. Unfortunately, we're discovering that that is still too long. So about 8 to 10 minutes appears to be about right. One of the things that's really noticeable from YouTube's own data is that the kind of videos that get watched the most are either very, very short or they're very, very long. And so that kind of 15-minute, 20-minute video actually doesn't get watched, not anywhere near as much. And so people can watch a 3-hour video because they make an appointment for it in their diary. They go, I want to watch that tonight, like a movie. I'm going to watch that this evening. I'll make an appointment for it. They haven't got time for 20 minutes in the day to watch 3 or 4 movies, but they have got time to watch 2 or 3 minutes. So they end up watching more video than they would do if they watch 2 20-minute videos during the day. But they don't realize they're doing that because they do it in short little snippets when they can fit 2 or 3 minutes in.
I think you told me that one student refused to look at one of these programs you've written because it was 21 minutes. So it was
21 minutes. They said that's too long. Yeah. So the previous one they'd looked at was 20 minutes and they'd watched the whole thing. But 21 minutes too long. Well, 1 minute difference, and that was enough to put them off.
This sounds like it's changing the whole paradigm of universities, doesn't it? If that's the case and it's all going online and it's 20 minutes. How are universities around the world going to cope, and I'll bring in Kevin O'Connor later because he's in Chicago, and I know he's leaving at some stage, but if he's still there, we'll bring him in and see what's happening in Chicago where Kevin teaches. I'm just going to show very quickly the agenda for the masterclass the top masterclass that Graham and I run. And people said this wasn't Google. Well, we've done it 4 times and we've had really good feedback. In fact, Christine Vine, who was on the call, paid for her 2 sons to come on this, and they're in their 30s. And we did this for 17 minutes. And the reason we did it was we thought 17 minutes, we could do it. Other people said you couldn't, but we're thinking seriously when we run the next one, which will be in November, we'll keep those timings shorter. And if you want to sign up, we're doing an online one on the 12th of May. And if you want to sign up as a present for anybody or anything like that, I'll let you know the details. We run it as a not-for-profit, so we've never made any money on it for ourselves, but we've had a lot of fun in a nice hotel in London. So back to you, Graham. You said you have also had a bit of fun at the Ivano Theatre, where you were the stage manager or something important like that, didn't you?
No, stage electrician.
Stage electrician.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about electrics, do you?
You don't need to know anything about electrics to be a stage electrician.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with electrics.
Oh, come on, you better explain this.
Stage electrician is the person who arranges all the lighting and the effects on the stage during a performance. So there are lots of things that need to happen. So even though it maybe be controlled by the lighting person at the back of the theatre, there are things that need to happen on the stage. So lights need to be put in places, effects need to be put in places. So, for example, when I was working on the pantomime and we had to have little explosions and things when, you know, a pumpkin turns into a coach, I'm lying behind a bit of scenery with an effect ready to prime that. And of course, that's got to be moved when the actors come on. So the stage electrician is just moving bits about. That may be controlled by somebody else, but there's physical work to be done. So there's always people, you know, doing odds and ends like that, and that's what I did.
And you were pushing some actors' bottom onto the stage through a window.
Well, I tell people that I spent 3 weeks of my life with my hands on John Inman's bottom every night. And for those of you who don't know who John Inman was, John Inman was a lovely man, actually, very, very lovely man. And in fact, he taught me something about professional speaking, which I might tell you in a minute. But he was playing Charlie's aunt, and he had to make his entrance through a window in effectively a wedding dress, a great big hooped dress. And so he had to make this dramatic entrance. But of course, to actually enter through a window and make it look dramatic, you can't really do it. You need a bit of help. So every night I'm there behind the scenes, behind the scenery, and he's getting ready to launch himself. And I have to push the window open and push him through every night. And so every night for 3 weeks, and on a Saturday afternoon for the matinee as well, I'd got my hand on John Inman's bottom to push him through the window.
I have to tell you that that wouldn't be a pleasant sight, John Inman. So you can decide, for those of you who don't know who he is, you can decide, but he's not with us.
It was a lovely man.
Bring Kevin in for a minute, because Kevin's got to go, I think, and he's as we know, he lectures at University in Chicago, and I'm interested in this new normal, Kevin. That's what's going to actually happen at universities with this attention span issue.
Yeah, I've been, for about 30 years, I've been not having any tables in my programs. It's all interactive, and I speak in lecturettes, which are 8 to 12 minutes long. That's the content. Then they immediately go into small groups for a few minutes to talk. Then they come out, then they have to find a new group after the next lecturette. So my programs have always been like component stereo systems where you can buy different pieces for your, remember those days? And we're doing the same thing with regard to using Zoom. We use the breakout rooms, and I agree with Graham. I think that, you know, when I did a TED video, they said, don't do the 17 minutes, bring it down to about 6 or 8 minutes. And I think it's a really good model for all of us. Nobody really wants to listen. There was a 1.5-hour lecture by a professional speaker the other day online, and I thought I would go out of my mind. And he's very famous. He's written 40 books, all that. It wasn't you, Graham, but it was, it was really terrible. And it surprised me because he was the star attraction. And of course he knew he was the star attraction. So I think he got into that record. He could have won the disco contest. And so the other thing is our university just put a thing out the other day. We're at Loyola. So all of our summer classes, every summer class, undergrad and grad, is online.
Yeah.
And they're making moves. They just sent me a note the other day and said, can you take some of your courses online, or can you do a hybrid model? And it's not only because they want us to be online, but they said they want to reduce the interaction on campus. Mm-hmm. So they want to have spread out classrooms.
Yeah.
I had a client the other day said, we want to do a program for 90 doctors live in August. And I said, how about the spacing? We've rented the entire ballroom, and we're going to put 3 people at a table in a ballroom that would accommodate probably 2,000 people. Mm. So that's really going to be intimate. And so I'm advising them they might want to think about Zoom. So yeah, it's going to be, and I think, and just the other day, one of the NSA people said, Derek, in the United States, he said, Jason Hewitt is his name. He said he's recommending every speaker put on their webinar, on their website, that I do virtual programs.
Yeah.
Because he said people are so used to it, they will want to know. And then of course you're going to have to figure out how much that's going to cost and all that stuff. But I thought that was, Graham, I don't know. I don't think life's going to be it's going to be pretty different after this.
Yeah.
Professionally.
I've just made a note of that to get my webman to do that tomorrow. So that will be fantastic. Great tip, Kevin. Kevin,
I have to hop off, and it's great meeting you, Graham. I'm going to subscribe to your newsletter and look forward to it. See you guys.
All right. Cheers, Kevin.
Cheers, Kevin. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I persuaded Graham to become the chief executive for the Professional Speaking Association when I was stitched up to become the chairman. And Graham, I just thought 3 or 4 things that you did to grow the organisation from 250 people to 600 might be useful for people on their marketing front, on their business development front, that are watching this live or on YouTube. And from memory, the first thing we did was to let anybody join who wanted to sit at the back and listen to the genius of some of the speakers, but they didn't have to speak themselves. So we changed the rules, and it's a bit like new normal, isn't it? I think the rules have all got to be changed, and that worked big time. What else comes to your mind?
I think 2 important things were process and systems. That there were very few systems in place, and there were no procedures, no processes for things, and it was all reinvented all the time. And actually over the years, I've noticed that with a lot of the business clients that I've been to, I go into their premises and ask them, what's your process, for example, that they're dealing with, I deal with the way people use web, and I'm asking them, what's your process for deciding what goes on your website and who does it and so on, and they don't have a process. And it's kind of, well, we just do it when we think of it. There's no systems, there's no process. And I think that businesses that have processes and systems in place do much better than those who are kind of running on an ad hoc kind of way of doing things. And I think that the PSA was just lacking any process or systems. So I think that what we did as a team was to establish those processes and systems that had been missing for years. I think that was, that when you look at what they're doing now as an organization, they're following many of the processes and systems that were in place, that we'd put in place when you took over as chairman.
I remember you've just reminded me, we also did something which is difficult to do with an association. We managed to change some of the people, didn't we? We managed to get some of the people who'd been on the board for a very, very long time.
Yeah, there was a Will Kintish, I remember. He was on the board for a while. Yeah. Oh, hello, Will. I didn't see you there.
Will have been on it for 11 years and done a fabulous job. But social loafing comes to mind. Now, that's a psychological thing where people want to be on boards, they want to be on committees, they want to be trustees of charities, but they don't actually want to do something when they're asked to do it. They just want to turn up at the meetings and ask difficult questions, which drove me and you to drink, didn't it? And one of the things we did was we used to sit opposite each other in the meetings, prepare first, have an agenda on a flip chart that we were going to do. So when the social loafers started getting difficult, we would nod at each other and deal with it and do a double act. And it worked, didn't it? But it was a bit time consuming.
Yeah, but that's about process again. You had a plan, you had a process of what you would do for each meeting, and you and I went through that process before each meeting so that we were organised.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a very structured agenda to run it, and it was our agenda, not some bog standard agenda which people generally had for meetings. And that's, of course, what I recommend to everybody that does negotiates, etc. And I know you do on sales. Tell me about your books, the latest books.
Yeah. I should have one, shouldn't I? Yeah, I failed. I should have one here in front of me to wave at you. I actually did that in a tutorial with students earlier because we were talking about the costs of publishing and why haven't ebooks taken off? Because you might not realise it, but ebooks are way past their. So the Prime Minister this afternoon has said we're past the peak, but ebooks are way past their peak. The sales of ebooks are really dramatically falling now. So we kind of fell in love with them for a while and didn't. So yeah, printed books, most important. Something like 80% of all books are printed, and that's going up. So people love print. And so I was talking about the costs of doing those kind of things today with students, and I waved a book in front of the camera, and then I've put the book over on the shelf over there and forgotten that I was going to be with you, Derek, so I'm sorry about that. But you know, there's this place called Amazon. I'm sure you can go and have a look. But yes, so yeah, well, you got it wrong, Derek.
I couldn't find your two books on my bookshelf, two of your books which you gave me, and I was going to say, well, of course I've lent them out; they're so popular. But I'll tell the truth tonight, as it's a Thursday.
Yeah.
Couldn't find them.
So yeah, so I'm afraid you got it wrong, Derek. It's not 28 books. Yeah, it's 32. So you missed a few out in your list when you were counting them, but never mind. So yeah, what do you want to know about them, Derek? Well, they're fantastic books that will help people. Yeah, what else do you need to know?
Okay, let's turn to this retailer you told me about, that you were advising a major retailer and they didn't have a strategy for a social media strategy. Was that right, in your consultancy?
Yeah, I've found lots of companies that don't have a strategy for anything, and big businesses. So, for example, I was advising a major insurance company, and they are number one in their market. They own 40% of the market, so they're a significant share of the market. They have a turnover of 700 million a year.
Graham, somebody will be putting this into Google if you tell them any more, and they'll have it worked out.
They won't be able to find out who they are from that, because there's lots of businesses that turn over 700 million a year. But you know, they were a significant business, and they contacted me because their competitor, their next competitor in the market, which had 20% market share, so they've got double their market share, but their competitor, their number one competitor, was getting significantly more social media interest, particularly on Twitter. You know, large numbers of followers on Twitter, and the number one in the market just couldn't get any traction on Twitter. And they wanted to know why they were not getting any traction on Twitter. So they called me in. So I had the sales director, the marketing director, you know, a few other board members in a room. And I said, well, it's obvious. I know exactly why you're not getting any traction on Twitter. And they said, well, we have, you know, scratched our heads. We can't work it out. And I said, well, have you looked at your own website? And they went, yeah, why? And I said, because there is not a single mention of you being on Twitter anywhere on the 800 and something pages of your website. So they haven't got a Twitter logo, they've not got a link, and they wondered why nobody knew they were on Twitter. And so we got into the conversation as well, whose responsibility was it to put the logo on? And it turned out that they didn't have a process for deciding what goes on the website, that each part of the website was the property of a different person. So the person responsible for pet insurance wanted some things on the website that the person for, car insurance didn't want. And so the website had no consistency, and it was no wonder that it confused people. And so you're talking here a major business that advertises on TV, that employs thousands of people, turns over a significant amount of money, no process, no systems, no strategy, and wondered why they were not doing very well. However, I was able to give them good news. So having told them that they didn't know what they were doing, in a very polite way, of course, that I was able to give them good news, because when I investigated their number one competitor, I discovered where their sudden surge of Twitter followers had come from. Now, bear in mind that in the financial services sector, you can only operate within a particular jurisdiction. So the insurance companies can only operate within the UK. If they want to operate outside the UK, they have to operate, in different, under different financial regulations. So all of their websites, if they are operating multinationally, they will have different websites for different nations or different jurisdictions. And so this website was just the UK jurisdiction. So the company itself had got a website for France, a website for Germany, and all the other places they worked at. So only the UK one was getting the Twitter traction. So they could only go to the UK. All of their increase in Twitter followers that was upsetting my client had all come from Nairobi, and they'd all come from Nairobi within the same 2 days. So it was quite clear that what had happened was that somebody in their competitor had said, we need more Twitter followers, and somebody had just gone out and bought because they just found some agency who would just, give them an extra, as it was, 16,000 extra Twitter followers. And then, the people at that company would have gone, oh, look, we're doing really well, but they're not doing really well. There were fake followers. And all it did was just, make their ego go better, because they go, oh, we've got more followers than the competition. Well, you haven't actually. You've just wasted money.
Yeah, sure, Graham. That's great. We're coming almost to the end of our time before we go to questions. Can you type any questions for Graham on any subject, or for me, into the chat box? That makes it much easier for us. And then, of course, I'll switch the recording off, and you can ask Graham anything you like, which won't be recorded or put on to YouTube. So yeah, that's so one last tip for everybody, Graham. I was just going to say, Twitter's history now, isn't it? Twitter's going south pretty quick.
I'm surprised Twitter's still in business, frankly. But when you look at how much Facebook, I've just invented a new company, Facebook and Instagram have, when you look at all the charts and graphs, Facebook is up here and Twitter is, way below the line, and, just around below LinkedIn, really. So LinkedIn obviously is much lower than anything else, because it's really quite niche and specialist in terms of focusing much more on business. But in terms of general social media, Twitter is nowhere in comparison to the others. Yeah, so many of it's even less than TikTok. It's just floating along at a fairly consistent level. Quite how they are starting to make money. They were starting to make money towards the end of last year, but not much money. But it's taken them 14 years to get any money.
Sure. Remind me who owns Twitter. Someone bought Twitter for a lot of money, didn't they? Google or
no? Twitter was allegedly being sought after by other people, but no, it's still an independent business.
It only just made a profit. It was floated on the US stock market, wasn't it, about 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Kevin wanted to know what your microphone is. You've answered that. It's Blue Yeti. Your audio is fantastic. Yep. I know you've got a good light there. Graham, what's your predictions for the corporate training market in the UK, asks Paul Archer.
Virtual. So, see, the thing about the current situation is that people are starting to realize that this kind of stuff works, that it's possible. And before, they were playing at it. And now they haven't been able to play at it because they're having to do it properly. So all the time that, you know, companies like Zoom and Microsoft with Teams and Slack and all these kind of people have been saying to businesses, you can do this. Actually, only a tiny proportion of businesses were really using those systems. And now many businesses are having to use them out of necessity. And what they're discovering is that actually they can do this. And when you think about it, especially now, lots of businesses with lower income, they're going to realize they can shut their offices down, keep people at home. They can cut their costs significantly and carry on doing things virtually. So I think the one thing about the training market is going to be that they're going to expect training to be able to be delivered online. So a whole load of pre-built modules you can deliver to people, as well as live bits as well, using video conferencing, breakout systems. You can put people into groups that you can do with Zoom, all those kind of things. I think they're going to be almost required that you would do them. And I think that if people think you're going to go back to training rooms where we sit down physically with people as the first option, obviously it's going to depend on the market and the kind of training. There's some practical training that you have to do physically, but for a lot of business training, I think people are going to be saying, well, we can keep the cost down by doing it online, because we haven't got to pay travel expenses. There's a whole load of things that they can do. So I think making sure that you are really geared up for a virtual future is going to be what people are going to be looking for.
Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody just for a few minutes. Will Kinsish wants to ask something. He's put his hand up in the box. Can I ask everybody to make the questions really short, because otherwise it gets all a bit confusing. So that would be fantastic.
Graham, 10 minutes ago you talked about our attention span is very short, 8 minutes better than 18, etc. And yet a few minutes ago you reckon that the future of training is going to be virtual. Yep. And therefore one assumes a lot longer. So you talked about 8 minutes and 3 hours. So you're suggesting that the 3 hours is then going to be the training?
Yeah. So for example, the way we're doing that with postgraduate students at the moment is delivering them a very short lecture of 8 minutes, 10 minutes, giving them something to do. So I then switch off. They go away and do something. They may do a group discussion using video conference. They may go away and read something. They then come back and we say, we'll come back in 15 minutes. Then they have another 5-10 minutes from me. It's a 3-hour session, but over that 3-hour session, it's all backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So a bit like you would do in a real training situation, you would do a bit of chat, then you'd give them an exercise.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think, so it may be a 3-hour session, but they're not sitting not sitting watching you as the trainer for 3 hours.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Guys, I think I am going to now, as it's Thursday evening, I'm going to wrap the session up and press the unrecord button. And then those of us that are staying on the line, Graham's agreed to stay on the line as long as possible. But I want to tell you about next week, because I've got on Monday, Will Kintish lined up to just to review some of the things that happened on our unfortunate session, but also to talk about the importance of asking the right questions. The quality of the questions you ask determines the quality of the answer that you get. And this works across everywhere: networking, negotiating, sales. And let me tell you from my experiences, from my teaching, most people ask poor questions and therefore they get poor answers. And then on Wednesday lunchtime, I've got the BBC producer, Esther Stanhope, or ex-BBC producer, fabulous speaker. She's coming on the programme at 12:30. And on Thursday, I've got a few surprises for you. Maybe we're going to have a few people doing very short 3-minute sessions. So thanks, Will, for agreeing to come back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll put this up on YouTube. If you look at it on YouTube, please like it and comment, because that helps all the social media information. Big thank you to you, Graham, for joining us. www.grahamjones.co.uk if you're watching this virtually on YouTube. So thanks, guys. Have a fabulous weekend.